I don't worry about the technology stuff. That's okay. I mean, we are people who have adapted to everything. So, and that's the testimony of that facets. The knowledge and the good medicine that our basket weavers carry. I want to acknowledge that Mom Sandra is here, and the president of ours is here, and I appreciate everybody's time being here today. The fact that Aaliyah Dunphy, she is a longtime family friend, very thankful she's here at College of Redwoods. I hope she will be here for at least another 20 years, Aaliyah, at least. Because that's how long it takes, right, to make a systemic change in a community. And so I'm thankful to be able to share here. Way back in the day, I taught here at CR for a couple of semesters. And I think about those students all the time. And my father, Ike Lowry, in Susanville, California, where I was raised, was the longtime director of the Equal Opportunity Program Lassen Community College. And I went to the community college, graduated from there, transferred to Humboldt State University. So to those of you who are students at CR or any community college, I appreciate the journey that you're taking right now. And right now I know it's a challenge, right? Every time we hear somebody else's voice on Zoom, there's the challenge, but stick with it. And I hope you have a good experience talking with us, and I'll let Alice have her time to introduce.
Ayuki, my name is Alice Cook. I'm a Karuk Tribe member. I'm the chair for the California Indian Basketweavers Association, and I have family all over the place, so like everybody, like all the natives everywhere. I think that we're all family. So I'm honored to be here and to speak and talk and to tell you a little bit about CIBA, the California Indian Basketweavers Association. I'm honored to tell you about some of my experiences with Basketweavers and what my goal and mission is to carry on our traditions and cultures for Basketweavers and help them and restore our lands. And I'm just hoping to create this 20-year thing that Chag spoke about. I got 15 years still on Yurok land, so I got a ways to go. So, but I'm looking forward to it. I've had a wonderful time, and again, thank you for being here.
So I have this handy thing called a clicker. I'm going to use it for those of you who are on Zoom. And feel free, if you're on Zoom, to type in the chat if you have questions or comments, and we'll get to those. So here we go. So the comic that I'm here to talk a little bit about the comic work and some of the work that I've had the privilege of partnering with a lot of Native vets in Humboldt, Del Norte County, all of the Native nations. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit toward the end about comics and film. How many in here like comics? Raise your hands. Okay, if you're on Zoom, put a thumbs up and like comics. Okay. How many in here like films? Netflix, Hulu, everything? Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience working with comics and then how that transfers into film. So if you're interested in that, again, type something into the chat. Okay. So my sister's is the story. Oh, wait, you can see that there. Okay, I can't see it on the title of that. So my sister's is a story, the way that I was taught growing up, that baskets have a voice, and baskets are carry our stories and our histories from our villages, from our families. And so to honor that, I partnered with the Tongva artist. Her name is Shoya Alvatre. The Tongva people are the original people of the LA area. And so Alice, do you want to share a little bit from your perspective culturally about the worldview and the concept of baskets having a life and a story?
Right. So One of the things that we do to start out a basket is, or before we even start to harvest the basket, before we go out and pick, there's this place that we're supposed to be in. It's supposed to be a good place we're supposed to be in. We're not gathering, we're not processing, and then putting it together. And that's what we put in our baskets to go into a dance. And so it is really important that we follow all those small little protocols, because that basket is going to come alive and dance in our ceremony. So that is a big part of what we do and where we're supposed to be. So if we're having a hardship or we're having something that is difficult in our life, we don't touch the basket. We don't. There are, those things that I think is really important when making a basket for ceremony, and because they're dance, they come alive. It's really important.
So this is a page for those of you who love comics and maybe want to write it. This is the process that I've used. But I wanted to start and honor the fact that as Indigenous cultures and educators, we've used sequential art since time immemorial. We've used the mathematical concepts and the composition that are in panels and comics. We've used them in our architecture and in our basketry. And so comics are just the latest form that we as Native people are going to take over and dominate. So I write a script, I send it to the artist, and they do little thumbnail sketches, like the one on the left. And then the image on the left here is a fully inked page. And then you see the colored version. So when I started to think about comics, I mean, my mom probably spent lots and lots of money on my comic book obsession. But reading comics like Batman and X-Men and Spawn, what I never realized is there's usually 3 artists in the art process for the comic. There's a penciler, an inker, and then a colorist. The really dynamic thing about Roshoyo is she can create all 3 stages. So normally it's at least 4 people who create a comic book. It's the writer and then the other 3 artists. But with Roshoyo and I, we worked for, I'd say about 8 or 9 months to create the story. And then I know Alice knows what this is. It's the bear grass. And I wanted to honor the mother and the daughters going out. And did you want to share anything about the process?
So the bear grass process, just like any material that we have, bear grass can only be picked a certain time of year. So when people, a very common question people ask about any basket to work is how long did it take to make? And the reason we can never answer that is because we have to go pick, within a 3-month period, then we have to process it, then we have to soak it and then use it. And everything takes time to do it. So there really isn't a timeline for these. So we can go pick out anywhere from May into May, just depends on the heat that you have in your area. So you're going out not only on the predicted time that you normally go through, but whether you have a lot more weather, or whether you have a lot more water that year. All the climate depends on what we're doing and how we do it each year. There's not really, there's a distinct time, but it really depends on the weather. So we'll go out and we'll pick, and then we let it dry, and then process it. We'll have to soak it and get it nice and workable. And bear grass is, there's 2 different, I think there's 2 different kind of bear grasses. There's burnt bear grass, which we traditionally prefer to use. We don't have the option to do that all the time now because it's a slow burn. It's not a very high heat burn, and we've had high heat burns, and we can go and use that bear grass, but it's not as I guess usable as a low intensity fire burn, which was done years ago.
And on this page, you can say, I wrote the dialogue for the Yurok and the Maidu pages in my sister's comic, and then Shoyo wrote the dialogue for the Tonga pages because we did not want to there's no pan-Indianism in our work. Each culture has the right, because we've sacrificed, suffered. The discipline teaches us that you speak about your own cultures. You have to, traditionally, we're very based on permission. So for me, for the pages, I wrote the dialogue from the perspective of baskets and the basket material. So if you're reading the comic, we usually have the human character narrating. In this story, it's the basket material baskets that are telling the story. So in that way, I think, oh, hopefully I'm not overstepping my bounds. I'm not a basket, but I can share the perspective of what I think and what I was raised. The baskets would be saying, the material we'd be talking about. And so the very first line is our relationship is the beginning. And as Alice shared, there are many disciplines within that relationship, the land between the land and the basket weaver. And as you mentioned, the fire, before contact, we didn't have in California these massive mega fires. And the reason we did not have those is because our Native peoples in all the communities have a partnership with fire and have used fire for many purposes. And so can you talk a little bit more about how fire is so important for basket materials?
So for our basket materials, like I mentioned with bear grass, it is stronger, it is more pliable and easier to work with the bear grass. We also use the hazel sticks, which we use for our baby baskets, we use for our gathering baskets, we use for our cooking baskets, and all those are things that we're going to carry our babies in. And really important to have something super strong to carry our babies in. We're not going to put something in there that's going to break. So it is that burning process brings them back stronger and brings them back longer for us to process. And those are our two main materials that we use for burns. There are some other ones, but those are our main ones we use for cooking baskets.
And can you talk, so it would be a burn that would happen every year or a couple times a year, maybe?
Right. What we're trying to do is, right now they try to burn in the fall and then they'll try to burn in the spring, but there's so many different, the birds, what's growing. There's so many different small things that go into it. They culture burn. And so those are all things that we're trying to figure out how we can do it and what we can do to make it an easier process so that we're often. So we're working with a lot of agencies trying to make it a better, easier process than what it is right now. And just figuring out what we can do together to make this land more useful for our Basketweavers, make it a safer place for them to go and gather and process.
So, thank you. So for me, the way that I was raised, and now that I'm a little bit older, still young, I'm not young enough to play basketball, but I'm a little older now, and I can kind of think about how our basket weavers and all of our Indigenous communities are really at the forefront of the land relationship that our cultures are designed around. Why we are here as Indigenous people is that land relationship. And all of the methodologies that our traditional art, culture, and teachings are about. So what I was taught by a lot of elders when I was younger and sit with them is that relationship that we have with fire. And it's a powerful, it's a respectful, it's a responsible relationship. And the fires that would burn through the underbrush. They strengthened older trees. They cleared out our pathways for the deer, for animals. They reinvigorated all of the large meadows in all of our communities. Fire is a necessary component to a healthy land relationship. When the colonizers came in and they considered fire as a danger, and fire as bad. And they codified that in their Forest Service policies, both at a federal and state level. So fire was taken out of the land relationship, and now we are suffering because of that concept, that westernized, colonized concept. And so to me, the beauty of when I see baskets, those are the visual representation of that land relationship. And so we need to hopefully reintroduce the basket weaver as the authentic expert in all of our communities. I know in our Indigenous communities, we basket weavers with respect and accord them their rightful duty. I think in society in general now, if we do that and switch that thinking, hopefully these mega fires that we will only continue to have every year if we don't drastically alter things and really just listen to the basket weavers. They have the knowledge. We have it as Indigenous communities, and it's contained within the baskets. Those are the stories that I've thought of. And then ceremony is necessary and key too. So really the Indigenous people, we have the knowledge that can help everybody right now in so many ways. The power of imagery to me is awesome. So I had talked with Shoyo, and she drew this great image of the young girl with the stem of one of the plants in her mouth. And Alice, can you talk a little bit about, I asked Shoyo to put that in there to educate people that basket weavers use their mouths often to work with the material. But if you have material that has pesticides on it, that's dangerous. So can you tell us about the struggle to find material?
Yeah, so that is, I mean, it's not as big a problem now as it was 10, 15 years ago with pesticides, because we were unaware of where the sprays were happening. And so we go out and pick what we normally pick, not knowing that they sprayed. Now we have a little bit more communication, we have a little bit more control of what's being sprayed so that it's not hazardous to our mouth. So there were some very dangerous things that came out of pesticides and putting it in your mouth. And you know, there's no stopping it. If you've done any basket weaving, it goes in your mouth. It just does. You don't. And in fact, you know, some of the coloring of some of the baskets, they use the saliva in your mouth to color it darker than what it normally used to be. Would not do that now, but that's what I was told, you know, a long time ago. So it's really important to have good working relationships and to know what's being put on it, because it can stay there for some time. We're just not going to cut it down and go back next year, and the pesticides are going to beat it. So it was a very scary thing for our elders, for any of the basket weavers around gathering and using materials.
So this is a picture of Shoyo, and again, she also wrote the dialogue for the 3 pages. The My Sister's comic is 12 pages, and she, like I say, is the artist and the writer. I encourage you to follow her on Instagram. Extremely talented, very disciplined artist. I know we have a lot of great artists in our Native communities, and I encourage you to follow Shoyo on Facebook and Instagram, because she's very honest, and I admire her transparency, and that it takes discipline to be an artist, especially in comics, because in sequential art, you can create one good image, and that's great. But in comics, you have to create dozens of images. And in the graphic novel that I'm going to share about, that artist, Masan Ekadal, created 800 images for that story. So Alice, can you talk a little bit about what you've been taught in terms of the discipline that's necessary to become a basket weaver?
So by no means am I a master basket weaver. I've met many weavers all over the state of California, Washington, Idaho, and all over the place. So, but I've worked very close with a lot of Yurok Karuk and Tolowa weavers. And the discipline you have to be able to do what you're supposed to do in a timely fashion is so important for the basket together. And there are things that happen in our lives that make it almost incapable for us to follow that timeline that we need to get it done. And so with that, it's a very structured, we have to get this done, we have a timeline, we got to get this done, and we have to gather it by this time, we have to process it, we have to put it together to be able to have a person. And it could be years that we're working on caps and cooking baskets. And so it's a disciplined process where you look at like a ceremony basket that is broken down and they're ready for another one. This takes time and preparation to do. It's not something, oh, we'll do this basket in 3 months and we'll be ready to build this. So it does, it takes a lot of discipline, and then that basket will stay in that ceremony for its lifetime.
So in this next image, here's the funny story for you. We better all laugh. Even in Zoom, I better see you smiling and laughing after the story, because I don't often share it. When I moved over here to the coast, the North Coast, I was born and raised in my dad's ancestral lands, the mountain Maidu in northeastern California. And I moved over here to go to Humboldt State. I'm second generation HSU graduate. But I moved over here primarily was to be closer to my grandmother because she was here. And at the house in Klamath, the first time I was here, I like to weed eat. That's like my thing that I like to do. It's calming to me. The machine drowns out the noise and something tangible. Yeah, I took out those weeds and I feel good. No. So the first time that I took the weed eater on the hillside of the house, family house, there's the 5-finger fern grows there. And it's very hard to find the 5-finger fern anywhere because they have to have lots of shade and moisture. And I didn't really know that's a primary basket material. So I took my weed eater that first year, took down everything on that hillside, and I was just, I'm going to feed this. Grandma's going to love it. Grandma, come down. I took out the whole hillside, and she looked sweet, little, Yurok lady, and she was very calm. But she said, "Oh, son," she said, maybe next time talk to me before you take the whole hillside down. And so she said, we'll come back down here a couple months. And then later on, after everything started to grow out again, she taught me about the 5-finger fern, maidenhair fern, and the stem that's used to weave in the black. So I said, oh, okay, that was a big lesson learned for Jake. So then after that, I would pick the 5-finger fern at the right time. My grandma would say, okay, Jake, I'll show you how to pick it. And there was a basket weaver there in Klamath, Yurok, Ada Charles, and she was from my great-grandmother's generation. And so my grandma would take me every year, drop me off at Ada's house. I'd have all this, the stem, the 5-finger. And Ada, to me, that was amazing because it's like I was visiting my own great-grandmother. She was the eldest weaver. And I remember her sitting there, and she would just say, come on in. She was so intent on her basket weaving. I remember her stripping, her eyes light up. And I'd have that material. And it was such a great thing. And she hardly ever talked to me because she was just very intent on making her baskets. And but I would sit there sometimes and just watch her. And I did that for several years. And one of the last times that I visited her, she said, "Oh, Jake, here's," and she had made me some of the little baskets. And that picture is one right there. So it's a very special basket to me because I actually picked the black stem that she used into weave. So for my own experience, there's the power of basket relationship. So now when I am honored to sit with someone like Alice, that's what weavers represent. Right? Represent community and family. So Alice, can you share a little bit, if you'd like, about your family, what inspired you?
So first of all, I'd love to comment a little bit on Ada's basket, because my mom and got a basket from her as well. About Ada's baskets, as she got older, she lost her eyesight, and so she still continued to do what we call a salt and pepper design, and that's what that is. And those are my favorite baskets. She made a lot of baskets and some really nice baskets, but my favorite baskets were the ones that she did with almost no eyesight. So that you have one of those is it is something to cherish, because that I just love that part about it, that she didn't, she still did her weaving without being able to see exactly what she was doing. So I brought some maiden hair just to kind of show some of the basket materials that we use when we gather. Of course, there's a time limit that we gather, the time frame we gather the maiden hair, and then pick and process and then store it into the facility. So, but I did bring some of it for you to see and to use. So like this basket here was the black maiden hair. So we didn't use any form of color that you would buy anywhere. It was strictly a color that was a natural color we picked. We never used any sort of dyes or anything unless it was a natural material. So the other product that's used also in Ada's basket is bear grass, which is what we spoke about earlier. And you can see these are long pieces of grass. They're green when we pick them, and you can see on the end they do have burns. So they were picked in a burnt area a year after the burn. So those are some of the, and it's used the same in this basket. So yeah, the process is it's a long process. He could probably tell you it took at least a full day just to process that material, and you didn't even get half of it. So it's yeah, you got this, you're gonna do it, and you go out and pick, or when you go out and gather willow roots, like she said, it makes you happy when you find this really long willow root. You get really excited, like, oh, this willow. It's exciting, and you're digging in the sand like a dog trying to get this in the heat. And those are the excitements. Those are where you see the lights in people's eyes of material, and you really have to understand that and see that and appreciate that. And I think that's one of my favorite parts, is going out and gathering and being a part of when I see weavers processing materials like that, or sitting together processing materials and couches and that. It's one of my favorite things.
And then also on this page, so I had the honor of submitting this comment to the CIBA, the California Indian Basketweavers Association Board of Directors, to endorse the comment, because in addition to dominating the comic book industry as Native people, we need to make inroads in the education system. And my way of honoring our community members as the authentic and rightful experts for our own histories is necessary structurally. So that's why I asked CIBA, the board. I'm very appreciative, because Alice was the one who encouraged me, and she is my connection to them. And they, as a board, decided to endorse the comment, the story, and it means a lot, to the Shoyo and to me. Now, when I go to school districts, I can say that this story it means something structurally, educationally, culturally, socially. So did you want to share a little bit about CIBA and the board, or the process that you talk a little bit about the comic?
Yeah, so we were really excited that Chag came to us with this comic and asked us to be a part of it. From reading the comic, as he had mentioned, it puts it a whole different perspective of reading as well. Because again, when you do read it, it's very similar to speaking in terms of materials, like these dumb material, putting it together. Speaking from the basket, which is kind of what we believe in. We believe our baskets are alive, and that's the story of this tower. So we were excited to endorse it, and we're so excited to see where Chag is continuing to go on with his comments.
It was really neat for me because the board, we did a Zoom, and I got to see their happy faces on top of it. It was really neat because, as an artist, or I mentioned in Basketweavers, you're putting yourself out. You're letting people see a glimpse of who you are, who your people are. And as Native people, we've been considered a threat in this country because of that. And so that's why it's important for me to always try and honor our Basketweavers and our Indigenous artists, traditional and contemporary, because we're not that far removed from the time when it was considered dangerous to be known as Native, a threat to the United States government if you're Indigenous in your language, that land there. So that's what the colonizers wanted. It's still want. It's the land. So that's why Indigenous people have been considered a threat. So that's why it's necessary to me to honor our heroes. And you know how, like in comic books, that's the superheroes, right? Comic books were originally created for superheroes, but to me, Alice and Basketweavers, Gala makers, like one, well, they're my superheroes. So the image on the left is a picture of Aunt Sue Campbell. She's on the right there, and her friend who was passed on, the late Marlene Montgomery. They created the Maidu cradle boards that are used. And so this picture, I thought, I always wanted to honor Aunt Sue and her friend as sisters. And Shoyo did a dynamic job. So my Aunt Sue is in the comic, and her friend is in the comic. And there on the left is my son. On the left, there's my son Mateo in his cradle board that is great and created, along with my dad. Dad helped me with the oak stem structure. And then Marlene created the hood. And so my son was raised in the cradle board. And that's something that's very precious. Our Basketweavers share that land relationship with us by gifting us their creations. And then on the right there is my cute little cousin, Michaela. And my Aunt Sue, that's her grandmother. So I mailed that comic to Michaela, and that's the very first comic she ever read. And how cool is it that her own grandmother is in the comic? And I thought, wow, that's all it is. That's all I need right there. Because look at that smile. Beautiful. And we deserve that. We deserve to be happy and to be able to honor the experts in medicine people in our community. Alice, can you share a little bit, if you like? Going back to your basket materials and creation.
So I did bring a baby basket, which was all three of my kids' baskets. So we spoke a little bit about the baskets and data boards and stuff like that, and again with fire and the strength. So this is actually carried on our back with the baby in it, and we do have right here, their legs on. So it had to be strong enough to be able to just strap it on and put it on our back, or we'd set it in a tree while we were gathering or doing something so that we were able to set them up or hang them up and make it sturdy. We didn't use it for a handle. we used it to hang the baby, set it up in the tree while we were doing gathering, whether it was food or materials. But again, we talk about having the strength of the materials. This basket is close to 35 years old. So, and I could use it with my grandbaby. It's that well put together and put together with good material that will last forever. So again, that I think is really important to have those materials to be able to carry our babies like that. Because it's an important part of it. This is, this is how they start their life. This is what they start their life in. And you'll see a lot more baskets that have a lot more adornment than mine does. They'll have the lifeline. They'll have the abalone shells along here. So yeah, there'll be a lot more, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And everybody's taught different, but I was taught that our abalone shells are here. And so when we do rock our babies, they're hearing the same noise that we hear in ceremonies when we start to hear our dancers come in. And that is, that's our music. That's our medicine, listening to them come in like that. And so when we're holding our babies and we have them like that, we're giving them that same sound to grow up with when they attend ceremonies.
I wanted to go back because I forgot to mention something. So I tend to look at structures in education and structures in American society that have inhibited or oppressed us as Indigenous people. And one of the structures is the publishing structure. Like, who publishes our books, our school curriculum, material that conveys to others what we are all about. And so for my comics and my book work, I created this, it's a comic book, and I titled it Original Voices. And I've used that term for nonprofit work, but about 8 months ago, I thought I'm gonna look up how to trademark the term Original Voices, because I'm gonna use that as I produce my own comics. And so I did the paperwork and submitted the form to the right agency and the fee. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I got the notice, the trademark, I own the trademark to the Original Voices name. So what that means is anytime anybody in this room or out there in your houses, anytime you say the words Original Voices, you owe me $10. Nah, I'm just kidding. You can still give me $10, but that's not what it means. What it means is no other company can use the word Original Voices, right? And if they do, I could write a big letter or something. But it was really neat. I learned a lot about the process, and you can't let the trademark lapse. You have to re-up it every so often, submit the paperwork. So, and with Shoyo, created the beautiful logo for me. That's the logo. So I wanted to share that. And going into my other comic book work, this is my first graphic novel that I wrote, Soldiers Unknown. The artist that I worked with, Rasan Ekadol, was actually born and raised here in Southern Humboldt. I met him at a comic con. How many of you have been to a comic con? Well, if you were students, I say everybody raise their hands. Just got an A for the day. I encourage you to go to a Comic-Con in your life if you can. They're fun. And there's a lot more Native artists and writers starting making inroads. Rasan is not Native, but boy, he and I have a good rapport. We worked together for 3.5 years on this graphic novel, which is based on my own family's experience, World War I, and the Yurok, Karuk, Hupa. All the Native families in this area have sent generations in the United States military, which I'll talk a little bit more about later because I always have questions about that. But to honor that generation and their story, I wanted to create a full color graphic novel. And color is very important. Color gives life, it represents life, right? And when I was growing up, I only saw black and white images of Native people. And those black and white images were of Native people who were dead and gone for at least 100 years. So that puts us in the context of being in the past, right? If that's all you see, if that's all the imagery that supposedly represents you in your community, that's disheartening as a young person. So I always wanted to create full color images as much as possible, because we're pretty vibrant people. We're not stoic people. That's a myth. I mean, if you wanted to see me get really upset, say something bad about Baby Yoda. Star Wars. And that's,
I thought you were going to see your mom.
oh, well, mom too. Because mom loves Baby Yoda too. So, but yeah, no, we're pretty emotional and people, and that's what ceremony and art, basketry, and grounding does. But I also wanted to show the fact that I am a really good artist too. This is my sketch on the left there. I told Rasan, I said, look, Rasan, I can draw too. I'm only going to draw one image, the cover, because this is what needs to be on the cover. You got three things: the head dancer, the redwood plank house, and the two soldier guys. And so I said, just this one time, I'm going to create a masterpiece and show it to him. And then he created his version, his masterpiece. So there are two masterpieces. And anyway, so I've shared this because I like people's responses when I talk about it. The one time I shared it, and my nephew was in the audience. And I said, does anybody have any comments about my masterpiece? My nephew raised his hand. Okay, I don't know what he's going to say, but I'm going to pick it. I'm going to call him. And say, well, what nephew? And he said, Uncle Chag said, how old were you when you drew that? And I laughed. But then I've been thinking, and I said, well, actually, that's an insightful question, right? Because if I was 4 years old and I produced that masterpiece, everybody here would say, 4-year-old Chag, that's wonderful. You are so talented. You got they're all in the panel together. Great job, 4-year-old Chag. However, I was 42 years old when I drew this. So I would not quit my day job.
Yeah, my mom said the same thing. Somebody told her, oh, that was great artist. Yeah, but she can't even draw a stick figure. And then exactly, I mean, I can't. So, yeah.
So I like to share, like, if you're a young person out there, everybody has talent. You just gotta find it. Just keep working at it. And this is some of the book work, and then I did a series called Living Biographies, where I was able to interview several Basketweavers from the different communities here. Those DVD programs are at HSU's library. And I know some libraries here in Humboldt County have their half-hour in length primary source material. But Alice, I was interested in your perspective on basketry and its many different forms, and I was hoping you could educate us about that there are different types of baskets. Ceremonial baskets. What are all in this area? Can you share with us what are the different types of baskets, and then what are the designs? Where do the designs come from?
Yeah, so that going So there's so many different baskets that we have. There's our cooking basket, and a cooking basket is pretty distinct. That you'll see a cooking basket, you'll be able to recognize it after somebody explains it to you. You'll be able to recognize the next one. So cooking basket is just made of spruce, and the reason it's made of spruce is because spruce, when it's submerged in water, it tends to swell. So it will cook the materials, and it also is a little bit more durable with hot rocks, so we can cook our soup in it. So it's a really strong material. So you'll notice it's all made of spruce. It usually only has one color to it, and that's the bear grass. And the reason it only has one color is the bear grass doesn't have a taste to it. So like the maidenhair would change the taste of it. acorn soup. And right now, the acorn soup is an acquired taste that we love, but not everybody loves it. So anything like that would change it, would change everything about it. So, and most of the cooking baskets you'll see, it usually has just the design of the bear grass. It also has a very distinct line in the cooking basket, and it's right about the middle of the basket, and that is to hold it together. It makes it more durable right in the middle of the basket. So those three things you'll notice about a basket that is, you'll notice a cooking basket. Those are things that you can identify that are used for just acorn cooking and stuff like that. So that one is one of my favorites. Another one that, just because of the purpose of what you can and can't do with it. The other one is the baby rattle. Baby rattles are made of just willow roots, and willow bark. And the reason they're made of just all of that is the baby puts it in his mouth, and it has a natural aspirin. So it actually is it's a teething mechanism. And it's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. You see them now, and they have designs and colors and things on them, but that's how they just like willow root, no color to them or anything. To the baby, it's durable, great. You know, the bear grass gets wet in their mouth and stuff like that. So originally they would just make it all willow. Now they have a lot more designs and colors to them, and you know, it happens stuff. But that one's one of my favorites too, because of what you can do with it, with babies, you know, do with it. And you should see those rattles when you're done. They're pretty amazing that they're still together.
Good morning. Or good afternoon, technically. Yeah. What's up? How you doing?
Yeah, so we really enjoyed it. And that's what another really good reason for pesticides. It goes into the baby's mouth. So, you know, you're putting together a piece of art, and that is going into the baby's mouth. And if that has the pesticides in it, it's not only affecting us in our mouth, but we could we're cooking it. So pesticides was a really, really important thing for us.
Can you share a little bit about, because I always get asked about the design.
Yeah,
in a basket.
this one in particular is a pretty old design that I don't see used anymore. And it's one of my favorites. It's a deer creek design. It's not my basket, it's Dina Dodd's basket. She's a Karuk Basketweavers. And she brought it to the CIBA silent auction. And I love the design. And I hadn't seen it forever. So yeah, it's one of my favorites in that design. You know, designs are some family designs, and some designs are very traditional designs that we've used forever and have a meaning for them. And although the tribes, they're very similar in their designs that they use, they have sometimes different meanings to them. So yeah, there's so many different, you know, sometimes mine would be a kind of different because his would be, even though it's the exact same design. I think one of the most common ones that I see is the sturgeon that's used the same way everywhere, and what it implies. And yeah, so that's the most common one I've seen that doesn't use different shade. So that was what I did. Now there's our dance baskets. You probably tell a little bit more about that. So you didn't hear those.
Sure. Yeah, we have the ceremony where women carry a basket. And I appreciate you sharing, because again, it lays the groundwork that sequential art designs are key to representation for us as Indigenous people. And so this image that I'll share here, it's a short documentary film that I'm working on, the late artist Rick Bartow. This was a beautiful concept art piece that Wiyot created. And in Rick's life, he was searching for his Indigenous roots. And I know he looked at the basketry here. He wondered about the ceremonies and the art. And so his journey, art and music really guided, and imagery really guided and he created his own beautiful. And he painted a lot of crows and ravens. So that's where that design comes from. And then you can see on the upper right, there are two small little helicopters. Those are the Huey helicopters because Rick was a Vietnam veteran. And so he was also struggling because of that time period in his life. And so that's just something that I wanted to show that I'm working on in the near future. And then this is one of my latest comics. It's called Follow the Water. And it's about the native man who's named Ishi. There. So Ishi was found in 1913. So the story is based in San Francisco in 1914. And it's basically a story that I thought of if Ishi could have spoken to another native person in his life, because he didn't, the language that he used, they were never ever connected to anyone else. But I thought, oh, if I could write that dialogue with him and someone else, where they had a shared language for what we say, but then also to make it a little contemporary. It's sheriff character is my Avenger, so I introduced him, and the cover image is Bernie Falls. I don't know if anybody's been to Bernie Falls, northeastern California. It's a very special place in the Klamath River. So, can you tell us, Alice? So, water is very important to us in this area, and just like fire is a component to the land relationship. What does water mean to you as a basket?
Of course, just like fire, people are scared of fire and they get nervous about fire. And it's become something very scary when it's never meant that for us. It's always been something that we need, and it was never meant to be, everybody packing up and leaving with the fire. That's not what we do. And the same with water. Water is important for our food sources, it's important for our basketry. Good water is really important for our food sources, and that's really struggling with the salmon at this point. And it's getting really tough now with the water and the way it is, especially this time of year right now. So it's just fishing is important, and that was our biggest part of our food source. And so to not have that, or to have it very little and pushing it out very sparingly is where we go, what we do with it. That's not what we used to do. That's not, we shared it, we used it, we used it year round, and we don't have, if we get through the year with the salmon that we have, we're pretty lucky to get through the year with the salmon that we have. So, but the water is important for all of our materials. If it dries out, we don't have a good material to choose from. Just like the maiden hair is the black is one that has to be in a wet area. So it has a spraying or it has a little bit of water source to grow nice and strong and get that strong back. So water is vital for us, just like fire is. How we live.
Talking about how Native people and our ancestral knowledge have been considered a threat in this country. One of the ways that the United States government tried to eliminate the threat in their campaign of genocide against our people was the use of the Indian boarding school system. And so art can be healing. Art can be confusing. Art to me is about emotion, about bringing out emotion. That's why anytime you live in a country where they target artists first, well, that's why. Because right, when people feel emotions, then what do? Then we start to have questions. And authoritarian governments don't want citizens to have questions. They want things to stay the same, right? Well, so our Native people, our young people, our kids, we may go through generations of these boarding schools where they try to beat out and stamp out our cultural and traditional knowledge. and they fail. And every time I think, and I see myself, anytime I see a basket, I know they failed. Anytime I listen to an elder speak, I know they failed. But for myself, I'm creating this boarding school story, and then it's a two-part, because I don't believe in just delving into the painful part of our native history, because we have a lot of resiliency, a lot of strength, a lot of beauty. And so the image on the far right is a work in progress piece. So the boarding school boy is based on my grandfather, his experience. And this, the grandson, is based on a little bit of my own experience in school. So what were the struggles, what were the connectors, and what were the strengths? So that comic will come out sometime in the spring. This is a sci-fi comic image. And so it's a story about a native scientist and his mom. And the mom was friends with Albert Einstein. And Einstein had a secret theory, and he gifted the theory to the native woman because he knew she would protect it. And she translates it in her language. So the young man has to find out about the theory by learning his language. When he does, he creates this time portal. He goes into this other world. How many of you have seen the movie Black Panther? Raise your hand, or Avengers? So Black Panther comes from the fictional non-colonized country called Wakanda. Wakanda. And so Wakanda is awesome. And I thought, well, what would be the indigenous version of an uncolonized country? And so I need to create that in this comic. And this is one of the protectors, and she's, a young indigenous woman, because the women have always been our protectors and always been the strength of our communities. So this comic's going to come out hopefully by Christmas. So you need to buy like a bunch for your kids, and for your family, Christmas presents. All right, on Zoom, Christmas presents. And thank you to Blue Lake Rancheria. So my wife, Rebecca, she creates a curriculum that goes with each of the comic, and it's based on state standards. You can go to this website, and I really appreciate Blue Lake Rancheria and Allison Robbins, who's here with me, for being the key community partner that someone like myself has always needed. And I appreciate Aaliyah so much for having me and Alice here, because we have this knowledge and to share and to build a network. And I think as a society, we really need to listen to our Basketweavers, both within our indigenous communities, but in all communities, because their knowledge can help us in our lives. Their knowledge is necessary to put things back in balance. We're out of balance, right? I don't think anybody in here can say, oh yeah, we're in a good state of being right now in this society. We're not. And the way that I was taught, and I appreciate my mom being here because she was my best educator. The way that I was taught is, why do we have Native nations? Why do we have tribal governments? Why do we have these programs? Well, it's to honor and learn from our educators, our medicine. Alice is one of our medicine. And so as much as I can do that in my life, and then also create good comics, I appreciate being able to do that. And so thank you to College of Redwoods. Thank you to Leah. And then I'll share. Did you want to share anything before we go?
With the basket, your sister's book, which I find amazing. One of the things that I do in any of our events, small events that we do, especially in this area, is I'll take it and I'll hand it up to them. It's something that we normally gift them something anyways for coming, and this has been something that they've treasured to get, and they're like, oh, well, we get more. So they're really excited. They love the story. So it has to mean something to all the Basketweavers as well that are reading it and understanding the concept of it. And I think it's a great book.
And I know I did, for those of you who are here in person, I brought some posters of my sister's cover image. And so don't take off without one of those. And Northtown Books and Eureka Books in the local area has them. So support the local bookstores. And then just wanted to end in my family and in my life, in my communities, my cultures. I was always taught, and I always believe that it's our Indigenous women that are strong leaders, and they carry our medicine. The first person in your life who ever helped you is your mother. Therefore, you know, the mothers should be in charge of everything. It might seem a little, oh, here's this guy explaining it. But I feel as I'm getting older, it's my responsibility to be a good ally and always share that. And the way that I was taught in my Yurok culture, that it's the women who are our decision makers. You need to always honor them, treat them with respect. And as men, we have our roles. We have to be responsible roles. We didn't have chiefs in this society. In California, I don't know if we ever had. That's a westernized concept. Or maybe other indigenous cultures have a more male-centric society. And that's okay for them. But here in California, here in this community, I'm speaking to most of my fellow indigenous men, we need to always realize and honor the fact that it is our women who carry the medicine. And we are there to uplift them and support them as much as we can. So I will end this with, that's my grandmother on the left. She's the one who guided me. She's the one who brought me over here, back home. And that's a basket that her mom made, my great-grandma. And then there's my mom in the middle, Sandra. She's right here. And then her two sisters, my Aunt Perky, who gave decades of work to Native health and in the Yurok tribal government structure. My Aunt Candy, who gave decades of work helping the health of the land. It's dynamic. She knows everything about the land. She takes you, point out everything. And then my mom, educator, galley maker, Star Wars fan. Now you know where I got my Star Wars. I love Star Wars. But thank you everyone very much. Thank you on Zoom. Are there, I know, Aaliyah, did you want us to take questions or anything off the chat?
Yeah, we can open it up for questions. I'll call her out with questions online.
Okay.
We have our president and vice president of Native here. Our student panel is here.
So if anybody has questions, just raise your hand and I'll,
I'm sorry. I've done classes with her. I've went into communities and we've done different basket classes with her. Somewhere down the line, she's related to us. So yeah, but last year, I think we did one or the year before that we had this open school. At the Orleans and Fort Santa. Did a lot of classes with her, which is amazing.
So you were talking about gathering the materials for the baskets, and you said at the right time. Are they all at the same time of year, or do you have to do it throughout the year?
So it's throughout the year.
Okay.
It would be nice if we had one month.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be nice
Yeah.
because that would be a lot of work in 1 month, but it's still there. You're going from January to December that you can pick things. And some can be picked after a frost. There's like I said, it's a timeline. It is a timeline that takes preparation, and you don't know I mean, like say you're gonna make a baby basket for somebody that you know is going to have a baby, there's somebody else is going to have a baby and you're trying to prepare for that one as well when you're going to prepare for maybe 2 or 3 baskets. So, you know, those are things that are you have to prepare for. And my mentor, Master Weaver Berna Reese, she goes out and she just gathers and she gathers and she gathers to make sure she has enough for herself to be able to make baby baskets, but also to help anybody else that might need that material. So that's something that she's taught me, is just to be gathering, not to clear cut and take it all, because that's not what we're supposed to do, but to go to these different places and gather so that all the Basketweavers have materials. So we do a lot of partnering.
Alice, how old were you when you first started to weave?
The very first time I was weaving is when I was 10. I went out and gathered with 2 phenomenal Basketweavers as well in Orleans, and that was my first go out and gather and sort of put something together. And it didn't do anything for me at that point in my life. I was very young, and I just didn't. And then 10 years later, came back, and that's what I wanted. And then going on to the California New Basketweavers was something I wanted to, so I could be the voice for the weavers that I knew and their struggles, to be able to get them platforms, get them places that were safe to gather and do this type of thing. So that's what it's like. My kids, as soon as they were able to move their fingers, they were on it.
And then you talk about it coming from a burn, and in my mind, if it burns, there's nothing left to gather. That it's where it's burned and then it's grown back up, because you said you can see the tips.
So
That's
with our,
what you're
so with our fairgrounds, we see that, we see the tips of it burnt, and I took a bunch of pictures just for some books in Happy Camp from that devastating fire that happened in Happy Camp. That isn't really the kind of fire we want. That isn't what we don't want, a devastating super hot fire. We want a controlled burn fire for our materials. They come back even better than, a devastating fire, they come back and we can use them, and we will use them from a devastating fire, but a controlled burn is what we were after and what we used to do. That's what we did. We did those on our private properties. We burned, and then it became, that somebody would go to jail, something would happen to them if they burned in these areas. We couldn't even burn on our own private properties.
And then after you gather them and dry them, and then you soak them. So are they wet when you're weaving, and then they dry? That's
right. So normally we'll, like, if we're going to use these, we'll soak them an hour or so before we start. Just the bare grass. Every material is soaked in, because some you don't want to, like, you can only reuse it so often, and then it gets, if there, something with water taken out, tends to get a little rotten. So you can only do it. You're trying to take materials that you're going to use in the 10 basket. So a lot of times if we go to where we're teaching somebody how to use the bare grass, we'll soak it the night before, and then we'll put it in a damp towel so it stays a little moist, a little bit dry. It's like grass, and there's great cuts. We'll give you paper cuts. That's what I call getting initiated to bare grass, is getting a paper cut, if you're going to get it. But that's another way you can tell whether it's a bare grass that's burned or not burned. The not burned one will cut a lot. It's not, it doesn't turn as well. It's not as high.
So traditionally for the controlled fires, how would people ensure like containment of fires?
So when they go out, they'll go out to these particular areas and get authorization to go out on this property. And there's a lot of different agencies that are included with it. So that's where that big protection comes. Is, there's different programs out there right now all over the place, and they have to have them to make sure that you don't get a fire that jumps and starts a big fire. So that is, when we talk about a cultural burn, it is an easy process. It's a big process to do it. So there needs to be a lot more that's happening than what it is. But there was that hard part of trying to get past all the red tape. You know, whether we can schedule a culture burn and the next day we can't have it because the wind is changed, you know, or the birds are migrating. So there's so many different things that go into a burn that can stop us. And you know, so it makes it, there's a lot of planning and preparation. Sometimes
And to add to that, I know for a lot of us, it's hard to envision that process. It's hard to grasp it without images. And eventually I'm going to write a comment about the whole process to show people, okay, this is, well, or maybe they'll do eventually videotape some of the cultural burns. But I was always fascinated by, you know, prior to contact. We're not that far away from contact in native peoples in this area prior to contact, right? So if you see in this area what I've taught, you see an acre and it has hundreds of trees, that's not healthy. You know, you want big trees spread out. And prior to contact, you know, when you talk about the cultural burn, well, there was no underbrush, you know, around the area. So there wasn't any danger of fire dumping to another place and, you know, going out of control because they burn every year. So when you burn every year, everything is still new, everything is down low. You know, you don't have brush that's hot, you know, 10 feet high. So it's a pretty different landscape. Yeah. I've thought about, okay, I think as we, as my fellow Native people go out there and try to educate others about this process, and it's necessary for us to construct the image of what it was like, what that cultural burn was like prior to contact, so that we can see, and then we get a grasp. Then when you're talking about policies, changing policies, it becomes easier for the non-native Forest Service guy from Washington, D.C. If he has the concept of it, that's the power of artwork too. So yeah, eventually work with an artist and work with some Basketweavers, and then we can have more of these types of sharings, education sharings.
And someone told me in terms of managing land that Mother Nature has taken over and she's managing the land, and that's the reason we have it. So it's out of our control now because we are doing what we're supposed to be doing because our hands are tied and what we normally have done in the past we can't do anymore. So again, fighting for our rights, which we've been doing for years, we're doing it with our Basketweavers as well. But yeah, that's what someone mentioned, and I thought it was very. I thought it was great. It was exactly right on because we're at a we're not at a good place. We're just not at a good place.
But to get to that good place, just listen to the really, I mean, really, that to me, it's that simple in all these communities. Native nations do have, we have our own tribal governments. In this region, if you want to really protect the rivers, then the Native nations need to be leaders, need to be acknowledged as the leaders in partnership or agency collaboration. Needs to be with the Native people. They're the experts for thousands of years. Did a question?
Yeah, I just had a question about the stuff. So you want to like integrate that schools around there, and like did you also want to teach like not just or the history of just the natives in this area, or did you want to teach all of it?
That's a very good question.
Because like yeah, because I'm thinking like if we were to do that, because I've been thinking about that too. I think our history is definitely more American history than American history. All American history showed they sugarcoat what happened and don't really talk about the atrocities that they did. And I think that each tribe across America has to have their own histories of how they dealt with it. And I think it's important not only talk about what happened in those reservations, but all the rest too. So it's not like that situation that we have to cancel and it's also very funny and ironic that like, yeah, they pushed natives way of taking care of the land aside. Like this is not how you do it, you know. Like now we're in a time where it's like climate change is speeding up a lot faster, and now they're trying to find out the old ways natives used, and it's like you didn't listen to us before, but now you're gonna listen to us now. And then, but still put up a bunch of obstacles that we can't still achieve what we need to.
Or get help and only this much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we could say that we did it technically.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to your question, I think it's necessary for Native people in all different communities across this continent. We all have our own experts in our own community. We all have storytellers and historians. But I think it's necessary that we share examples, you know, so that you know, I can learn from the Hopi, or I can learn from the Pomo people down south, the stories, the examples. And I know that's like the power of CIBA as a Basketweavers gathering, and you network and you come together, learn cross-culturally. Right? And I hope that that's the method so that we can share. Every culture is its own distinct culture. We have connecting experiences. And what are those connecting experiences? And sometimes it's a challenge to be Native and put yourself out there and say, oh, you know, I want to educate or I want to be a, you know, talk about whatever the subject is. But one of the very strength-based connectors is the Basketweavers. I've never, ever heard any Native person say, oh, I don't want to hear about, you know, another culture of basketball. I don't want to, you know, it's always positive. It's always brings about a good community relationship. So that's the challenge as Native educators. What are those connecting entry points for us when we start the conversation about Native history? Because it is so filled with hurtful experiences and traumatic experiences. What are the strength-based ways that we can start the conversation with? Me, it's the basketball, or it's our traditional sports guys. And we have it back there, dynamic man who, you know, helps with sport. And then in my life, I've kind of dedicated myself to the whole Native veteran experience, because that's an experience that is relevant in all of our Native communities. Most people have no knowledge of it. Very humble about it. The Native vets that I've always worked with are humble, but their experiences are valid. There are many lessons to be learned. So I would look at it that way. Look at what are the connectors. The most powerful thing, and I think that's why the pandemic has been so harmful in so many ways to Native people, but one of the primary ways is when we get together a lot. And that's our community. You know, for Native people, it's been devastating. You know, we have an dance ceremony. We don't get together like we do. So I'm hoping virus situation, some do the job, make the best efforts and get out of this. But for Native people, we're going to have to again adjust, and that is our power. We have the inherent power to adapt, to be resilient. We have to figure out new ways to be together, come together, and heal. But always go back to me. Asking, how do I do that? Thanks for your question. Any other questions? No, go ahead.
Well, I use
More. You have a question?
Oh, get your opinion on what I like on Indigenous, bridging that gap between the past and the present. And we talked about this before, not having the modern day representation of Native peoples. nice to have you look out there now and see the media. Afghanistan, people turn it on and see things like that. There's only modern day, not just a black and white picture. Is that, I know that kind of your thought process is bringing like, I really like the way you tie baskets to the modern day to understand like, we practice all that stuff. That's for native youth today. It's something we didn't. It's huge.
Thank you. Thank you for your good. I consider you as a role model. And you know, we need the native mentors, right? Any good mentorship and basketry mentorship is key, right? That's what those boarding schools tried to break down. Ability to raise kids, to know how to have, how do you know how to be a mother or a father if that was the structure you were forced to do? They didn't know. So mentorship is important. Yeah. Not getting trapped in the past. Say like, we want contemporary stories. We're here, like there's much of it right here, right? And what are we doing? What do we have to offer? And as much as we as Native people can be in charge of that process, owning our storytelling, owning our curriculum, owning the way that we are portrayed, especially in social media and pop culture. That's why I kind of went into comics too, because unfortunately, I think most non-Native people get their education about what they think Native people are by whatever movie they've seen, right? So to me, I was like, well, a lot of movies nowadays are based on comics, right? And so if I'm going to go to that foundational place of storytelling, I'll use the comic. When Netflix buys my comic, my Hulu, or I don't care what Hulu at this point. There's so many of them out there. Then I can at least know, okay, well, the foundation piece is authentic. I just know, gotta stick to this imagery, this color, Native actors and actresses. You have any comment on that? Like, how, in your mind, Alice, I'm curious, how have you seen Basketweavers, that experience, that special experience? How have you seen it conveyed in the education system? If you could say this is how you want Basketweavers to be looked at or thought about, what would you say?
I'd say get your book. But no, I think that's a wonderful book for the school system to have it very structured out, and especially in the smaller communities where the youth need to know how things were a long time ago, need to learn the respect that we, that's all going away. That makes sense. It does. And I'm scared for our youth. Those are thriving people. We learn from our elders, and they're the ones that are getting everything in there. It's a living place. And it's really, really, it's disheartening. So that's one of my big things, is to push with the youth and the elders and combine them and build what we had a long time ago and keep it. I think the book is a great way of showing some of that and showing our history and how important our history is, not just what they're reading in the school, but our history. And being able to know exactly, this is what my mom and dad said, but it's just what my mom and dad said, this is what the school is saying. So there's a difference in how, when you go to school and they're teaching you this is the way it is, and you're going home and you're trying to figure out which is the real way. So to have something like this in the schools is going to be important, so that they see this is the teacher, everybody's approved of it. So that they will really understand they're not getting just 2 forms of, because it's confusing. You're hearing that at school and then you read this at home. It's confusing. There's 2 which directions. I think it's important.
I want to ask you how you like discrepancy what these some know like some are basket things and like pulled out others, but part of the don't know everything. They like build a language from the architecture, but I don't know like that's but I got like talk about that's what I'm talking about that. Ensure that all
So I think they need to get a lot more culture. Like they had them a long time. And in those culture camps, they had language, they had regalia, they had Basketweaving, and they were, I think they need to reach back out to them. We need more mentors. We need a lot more mentors. And we need youth mentors to mentor youth. And I think that's a really, really important thing is to have a, you have somebody who is teaching you the right way. I've done a lot of youth in Yurok, and some of them are just wow. The things that they know is just phenomenal to me about ceremonies and so young, but then not know anything else. That's just the ceremonies, but it's phenomenal. But to take those bits and pieces and put them all together in the culture camp and teach everybody what we used to know where we were split up, we were all in this big camp. That's what the culture camp was, is the way it used to be. We were all in this big camp. We were all teaching these things on a daily basis. We didn't have structures that told us when we could do these things. So that's what we need to go back to, ways and have a big camp, which includes families. It's a big healing thing. It's a healing thing for everybody. We have the one on your architecture, right?
Yeah.
So we have Margaret.
I know that that's one way to it's more blocks. My reservation has that, but and also another big problem with that is when they go home, parents don't know, or parents are holding together to want to balance first. Whatever. So,
that's where I think the youth mentorship comes in place. It's like if you're hanging out with a friend that knows the language, you're going to adapt to it, whether or not you guys will combine and do that. And that's where the future youth mentorship is helpful, is to have somebody the same age that people are all learning different things. Because you'll learn whatever they're learning or whatever, So I think that's important. How do you
Going back to your question, in terms of what are the elements to Indigenous life? Nobody knows everything. And even prior to contact, we weren't. And I guarantee you, we're people that tripped in the woods, right? We weren't, and some were good fishermen, some were basketball, some were warriors, some were together. And it's okay. Every experience, every out. And most important, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others. Then you can go to cultural knowledge, but mental health, spiritual health of us, that is key. So it's okay if you don't know your language. It's okay if you only know a couple of languages. It's okay if you don't know certain things because everything's been so disrupted. It's not our fault. But you can pick it up, and it can take a lifetime. That's okay. I try to tell people that sometimes we need to give ourselves a break. Right? We're always like, go, go, go. Intensity. It's okay sometimes to laugh, and to watch Reservation Dogs, and chill out, Netflix and chill. right? Yeah, that's right too. But that's who we are too, right? So, you know, I wanted to kind of touch on that. The reason why I went into the whole veteran experience and history is because I didn't see anyone else doing that. And we all have vets in our communities. We're proud to love them. But it's such a big part of our experience. It's another entry point to the Indigenous experience that no one was devoting themselves and trying to honor those vets and share those histories. So I tried to do that. But and then to your comment on, could this area have its own school? Yeah, in a place where you have capacity for Native administrators, Native teachers, Native curriculum development. Well, we're getting there. There's partnerships that are happening, and we have way more Native educators and far more non-Native educators who have an understanding and awareness, at least, who will be good partners. Way more of that now than we did 10, 15, 20 years ago. So
yeah, when I was younger, it was Manitoba Tribe in Syracuse, New York, and they have their school there, and like their schedules like half the day, but they completely spoke in their native language, like the whole day, and teachers and all faculty and staff. I was like, that is pretty amazing, considering how much, like going back to my reservation, how much we have lost in wise, and to see that they're how like flourishing is, It's only possible, it's just definitely a lot of
language immersion, yes, definitely the way to go. Because language carries philosophy, carries life disciplines. So it is encouraged people to delve into it. But I also give respect to those who might take them wrong for whatever reason. That's my perspective. Any other questions?
Yeah, just on the note of like media representation, which you've contributed to. What are your thoughts on over the past year, there's been like 2 shows like Reservation Dogs, like you mentioned, Rutherford Falls, that like have a lot of Native actors, and writers, and all that. I was wondering, what are your general thoughts on those shows, and why do you think that it's now that that's finally emerging?
That's a good question. I'm thankful that it's happening now. We have to, as Native people, build capacity to get to that point. So I think a lot of those writers and actors and actresses who are Native, who are part of those shows, they went through mentorship programs, probably went through culture camps, to retain their cultural identities as much as possible, and then venture into the scary land of Hollywood film. And I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, that has stimulated a lot of societal change. We need a lot more. But in terms of, we want authentic voices from all cultures, from all generations, from all experiences. Authenticity is what should be just at least the bare minimum. Right? So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of that type of representation. And that's great. I like the show Native Star Wars fans. Yeah, the question.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I got a hold of some that changed me and helped me get through times of my life. And that's when I've been to Comic-Con and your inputs. Are there any new ones that really inspire you or that you recommend checking out? Or?
So in the comics in general, or just for Indigenous comics? Well, Red Planet Books and Comics it's Native-owned And the gentleman, Dr. Lee Francis, also owns a native press. And so if you go to his website, it's the Red Planet Books and Comics. He features a lot of cutting edge, not just Indigenous comics, but just independent work. I like independent comics myself. I read a lot of war comics growing up. So those artists, their artwork inspired me. They have different styles of artwork. Yeah, I'd have to, Bashoyo, if you follow her on Instagram, she's creating some dynamic work. And I know she has a couple of projects in the next year or two that come out. I can buy. But yeah, I appreciate that. You know, that whole the graphic novel format, there's much more respect given to it now. And the way kids learn now, very image based. Like, I'm bored, swipe, you know. So the page, you know, graphic novel, you know, it's fast, minimal dialogue, but the image can tell a lot of the story. So yeah, that's I've learned a lot of young people, that's the way they like to learn, more visual. The other, I don't know how much more time we have. Go ahead. I want to
Putting you up right now. Yeah, stop talking. No, I want to thank you all for coming. And we have food and we just want to serve you guys first. Make sure stay chat next to each other. Yeah, I know. Like, nicely.
Thank you.
I got one of these.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving every part is so cool right now. But my belly also has conflicts that we have over there. That we have pie and we have lots of coffee. But just thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for birthing such a wonderful human being. Thank you for the connections that we have.
Can you record that on Zoom?
Absolutely. And I was funny to begin. I text Vince and asked him for a funny story. I said, do you have any stories you want me to bring up? Anything that, oh no. Do I have a hit? That's random, but I do. I'll get you one. But I just want to thank you. This is such a gift. I left all of the books in there, but Chag will be presenting again on November 10th. The first time I saw Chag's work was an elder that I worked with on Tablecloth. I didn't realize his full story until I watched your documentary. And then I wish I'd asked him. You know, and so I'm just grateful that we will get to see you again. Thank you, Alice, for being here. Thank you for everything. And so we want to give you food and pie and coffee. So thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who was present online. We appreciate you. And we have books for everyone who's present and everybody who's online. And if you sweet talk Chag, he might sign it for you.
You have to say the words original voices. Pull out $10 bills. Yeah, I'll sign whatever.
Did you write that in your business plan?
What's that?
You wrote
Yeah,
that
I
in your
know.
business
Yeah.
plan?
Oh, thank you.
So he's, I think